Hello and welcome to Technique Friday. This week's lesson is all about Neocolors. I've been asked by some of my subscribers to just do a little bit about Neocolors, their properties, maybe comparison, and what they can and can't do. So I have pulled out some of my Neocolor crayons because I have a lot of them now. And I have a work pad here. I'm also going to compare them initially with some portfolios, but I also have some other water-soluble crayons that I know will fall completely short. Now, one of the reasons that Neocolors are so darn popular is because they are completely water-soluble and they are lovely and creamy at the same time. So when I use them, say I just do a circle here like this and I'm going to put a bit of pigment down. If I use an aqua pen, and I'll just get some out here, squeezing it down. If I scrub into that, it's lifting the pigment. And one of the signs that you have a great crayon is how much of the original scribble line is left when you apply water. So as that dries, I want you to have a look really well to see whether that has any of these scribble lines here, and that is a Neocolor. Now I'm going to do a similar colour now in a portfolio. They are actually softer than Neocolors, and I'll do some lines in there so you can see what I'm talking about. So here's when I add the same water pen and apply the same colour. The same type of technique where I'm scrubbing. Okay, so there's the portfolio. Now the portfolio are a great crayon to start out with. If you can't afford Neocolors, which are expensive, then the portfolios are a really great and inexpensive way to actually start off in a water-soluble crayon journey. Now the only thing with the portfolios is they come in this set. This is the most you can get. So once you've got all those, you've got all those and you're limited. But there is a pretty good colour palette there. With the Neocolors, there's, and I'll go to my Neocolor chart because off the top of my head I don't know, but that's why I have one of these. So I'm looking for crayons at the top, and this is my Neocolor chart. So in the Neocolors, there are 126 colours as opposed to 24. Big difference. And the thing that I like about the Neocolors is that you can then grade your colour very, very well. So if we start from a warm orange, to obviously a lighter orange, to a yellowish orange, and then to a yellow, still on the same orange palette, very similar these two, but they look very different here, right? Now when I go to grade those, I'm going to use a big watercolour brush, and it's quite wet. I can blend those together, and if I want to scrub it a little bit, they blend together. You're actually having a look at some of the dirty water that was in my brushes because I didn't put it back into the watercolor container that has clean water. Let me show you that again. This time I'll do it with purples. So I'm going to start out with a dark purple. I'll go darker again. Dark purple, lighter purple, lighter again. I'm sure I have one even lighter again. I like to use a basic rule of 3, and that's a blue purple. I've just found, there it is. Here we go, lighter again. There's that colour there, right? So I have clean water in this brush now, and I'm not going to go really, really wet because I'm going to scrub, but you can see that there's water coming off on my hand. So I'm going to scrub the colour out of the pigment, and then I'm going to go and grade it using that same motion the whole way. You see that blue's going to pick up here. And you see that colour gradient all the way down using different crayons. And the thing that I love about Neocolors is you can layer on top of them. They are water soluble, and they are lovely and creamy and waxy, but they are water soluble and they don't retain their waxiness. It is water soluble, completely water soluble. So as we have a look here, this one here, its lines are blurred beautifully on the inside. This one's just that little bit sketchy. So a lot of the time I'm going to pull some letter journals out because I've used these Neocolors in letter journals a lot. I use them a lot for backgrounds, and they are able to colour in a lot of colours very easily. So now I'm looking for a page where I've used them to do something with. I know that I've mainly used them in others' journals. Okay, so I used the pink Neocolors underneath this just to blend in that whole background because I didn't want to wet the whole page with paint. So I used a crayon and then used the wash. Just finding a page. On this girl's hair here, Neocolor on the hair. And using a little bit on the lips. On this page here, the background, right. So you can see this background here. So on this background, I used yellow and blue and turquoise Neocolors, and I wanted it to tone in with the turquoise ink pad that I used here, and then I've got the purple going up into lighter turquoise from the top. And I've got a lot of different colours, but that whole background is blended with Neocolors, and then it's sealed on the top, and there's some Daddy Vans on the top there. And the bird's colours were blended with Neocolors as well. But they weren't blended straight with a crayon, they were blended with a water brush from the back of a crayon, right? So that's something that I'll talk to you about in a minute. Let me have a look and see if there's any more in here. I know I mainly use them in other people's letter journals. No. Alright. So, back to our lesson. So Neocolors can be used as a wash. So let me just clean off my brush. Now that doesn't look like that's been scratched, so my trick to you is scratch it on the bottom, take the plastic coating off the bottom of that, because there is a plastic coating, and then start to create a puddle of colour by scrubbing your brush on the bottom. And then you can create a watery wash that you don't have to draw with, right? And you can watercolour paint. So I can add in additional colours here and blend that out as well. I can add in additional colours here without having to draw the crayon and mark the paper anymore. And I can change the colour of that purple because of course they still blend because they're water soluble and they do activate. So the properties of these, that they don't dry permanent when they're dried after they've been water activated. They actually will reactivate again, but they will start to seal. They won't be as easy to move as, say, Delusion sprays, inks, okay, because they're highly reactive. These are not highly reactive, and they do sit well in journal pages. So I'll show you a journal page where I've used a number of techniques using Neocolors. And this is from my 2014 journal. And there's a specific page that I'm looking for. Here we go. So this page here on the in my journal was actually a page where the whole background was done with gesso and a rough kind of paint, and then over the top of this girl's dress and over her hair and over her skin, this was magazine over collage, collage over magazine, paint over collage. So what I did, when you're using Neocolors as a bottom layer over something glossy, you don't have to activate them with water. You can activate them with a number of different media. So another technique for activating, gosh, I can't get my P's and Q's right today, for activating Neocolors. So say I'm going to draw a face, and I'm just going to draw a face like this, right? Just start out with a circle, and I'm just going to leave it like that. I'll bring that in. Now, if I was going over a magazine collage, glossy, and I wanted this to not just go streaky on top of something glossy, the first thing I'd do is use a clear gesso to activate it. And let's just have a look and see what that does. See how it's still moving the pigment, and the grit within the clear gesso is creating a very smooth transition there, and it will do it on top of glossy paper. This is not glossy paper, but it will do it on top of glossy paper. Now I have some glossy paper here. Okay, so I've got black glossy paper. So there are a number of different ways that you can do this. So you can get, and I'm going to go very light colour here so that you can see what I'm doing. So I've got black paper, black glossy paper. I'm going to draw this on, and then I'm going to activate it with some clear gesso. Now see how that gets a bit streaky? See how it looks really streaky on the black? Right? Now the same would happen if I activated that with water. Let's just have a look at what happens when I activate it with water on a clear and glossy surface. Can you see that it's not adhering to the surface? It's actually starting to pull away. You can see those little spots forming. It's pulling away from the surface, and it's not doing that with the clear gesso because it's mixed with something that's toothy. Now I'm going to leave, I've got a patch of clear gesso here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a box. I'm going to leave that to dry. I'm going to put a reasonably thin coat of it on and just spread it out, because I want to show you the difference that it makes when you start putting something down before you use your Neocolors on glossy paper, and what you mix them with and what happens to them after that. Okay, so this is all on glossy paper, and I'm going to let that dry. While I'm letting that dry, I'm going to go back to this test here. So that's with clear gesso. So now I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it with matte medium, because matte medium is another way that you can seal, and it helps to seal your Neocolors. So I'm just going to put a dollop on, and I'm just using it with that same scrubbing motion. You see that scrubbing motion? Now, one thing that I do notice with matte medium is it doesn't seem to activate, but you have this beautiful creamy glaze that you can make. So I've got a lovely creamy pale glaze there, which is perfect for doing faces with. So you think to yourself, if you want a glaze, you can make glazes out of Neocolors. You just make a puddle of them, mix your glaze in, scrub it all out. But this circle now, you can see that there are still some crayon lines because it doesn't activate it quite as well as water. It doesn't permeate into the grain of the paper like water does, and it's much drier, and it doesn't make the paper ripple as much as water does. So then you pick up the glaze that you created and you use that to layer your circle. But you can definitely, I activate mine all the time. Let's just go outside and have a look and see how that glaze affects going outside, and how that, when we work that line, that outside line, will it eventually disappear? And I find more often than not that it doesn't. But if you were to do this over gesso, it would. So let me get a little bit of gesso, and we'll spread that on. And I like using my gesso in an old ketchup container, and it just sits upside down, and then I just squeeze it out. So I'm just going to put a layer of gesso here and let that dry. And there's another technique I want to show you, because you can activate with gesso as well, and you can get a real creamy colour with gesso. So if I'm going to do some scribbles here, right, I'm just going to do some scribbles. Now I'm going to get my paintbrush out, and I'm going to go back to this pool of gesso that I've left at the bottom here, and I'm going to get some on my brush. And then I'm going to mix that in, and again I like to use a scrubbing motion. Have a look and see the effect that you get. The lines completely go because you're using an opaque substance. It's not watery, it's not clear, and it starts to colour it up, but you've got this beautiful pastel colour. So in relation to, you've got this glaze here, and you've got it mixed with gesso there. It becomes an opaque layer. It's not translucent, and it gives you beautiful colours. And often I like to activate with gesso as well, because I'm looking for that really, really ultra creamy sort of look. And I may not want to just do that with pastels. I may want to suspend the Neocolor within the gesso, makes it less reactive in the future. And the only way that I can now test this further is to let all of this dry, and I'll be back. So everything's dry. The clear gesso's dry, the white gesso's dry, everything's dry. And of course you can see this isn't like proper watercolor paper. So now I'm going to try, and I'll show you what that's like. You can kind of see, it has tooth to it. Still has a reasonable shine through it, but not nearly as much as what it would before. Okay, so let's get a crayon and see how it picks up in the tooth. Let me just zoom in. See how it picks up in the tooth? So it grabs, and then when I go to water it down, it's still a bit streaky, but it's much less streaky. And it grabs in those fibres or granules of the clear gesso. So I'm going to let that dry and I'll show you how that dries. But again, I now want to show you what this looks like on top of gesso. So we've got gesso strip here that I painted earlier. I'm going to use the darker colour so that you can see clearly what happens. So I'm just going to draw a square here, and I'm going to shade it in dark there, and now I'm going to watercolour that in. Now, just like with actual watercolours, when you do this and before they're drying in liquid form, you can actually then dry your brush off so that it's only damp, and you can lift colour out. Can you see how I'm lifting that colour out? If I were to do that again, I can lift that colour out. So these actually on gesso and on watercolour paper actually act like watercolour paints. And then you can see that it's got that nice fine bleed around the outside as well. So I could take that in again and just let them move together. And then I look like I've actually used watercolour and not neocolor for that. Now if I was going to activate it with a matte medium, clear my brush off because I don't want a watery brush. Throw it into the matte medium, so I've got a little bit of matte medium on there, and let's see how it moves. Can I get it to move? Yes, I can. Now, it makes a bit of a glaze. And I can use that glaze over here as well, whatever's left in the matte medium in the brush. And the only thing you need to think about is how streaky that looks. So I'm going to just add some round swirls in that. But see, it's not nearly as strong. It does the same thing, it binds it like an acrylic paint, even though Neocolors are not an acrylic paint, and binds it into a glaze. So you can draw with these things, you can colour with them, you can shade with them. I've showed you quite a lot of different uses for them and different mediums in which you can use them. Go and have a play. It really doesn't matter if you scribble in backgrounds and you do amazing sort of colour washes, or you colour in animals, or just play with them. They are crayons, they're there to be played with. They are my favourite because they have the best dissolvable properties of any other crayon I've ever used, and that's why I prefer them. But like again, there are some viable alternatives to get you through if you're just starting out. So say you're just starting out and you're doing a course, and this portfolio set has a flesh colour in it. So even if you want to start doing faces, that flesh colour in the portfolio is actually a really decent colour, and you can mix pinks with it to give yourself a pink hue as well. And so you can mix those colours together. You can see this little circle here. You can mix these colours together, and this is on unsealed paper. and you've come up with a completely different skin tone colour that's slightly peachy pinky. So Neocolors are my favourite, but general watercolour crayons, the way that you test them is to see how much of the crayon mark, after you activate them, how much of the crayon, the initial scribble mark you made, showed. If you can see a lot of it, they're not a very good watercolour crayon. If you can't see very much of it at all, they're much better. If it's a Neocolor, and you shouldn't be able to really see anything of it at all. Alright then, ciao for now. Remember, learn something new today. It keeps you young.